Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Backstage Classical Career Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Katrina Stroud, and I'm a classical violinist who started playing at the age of 3. I graduated from the Robert McDuffie Center for Strings at Mercer University with my bachelor's in violin performance, and I'm pursuing my master's in music at the University of Michigan. In this series, I invite esteemed classical musicians onto the show and interview them to tell their stories and give advice to share with others and preserve their legacies. My interview with violinist Annie Fullard will be split into 2 parts since we had so much to discuss about her career and she had so much wisdom to share. This week's episode will focus on her musical development and her early career as a member of the Cavani String Quartet, and part 2 will be released next Monday, the 22nd, focusing on her development of the art of collaboration and her chamber music pedagogy and legacy. For those of you who don't know Annie, she is one of my most influential mentors and is an inspiration to all who meet her. Annie stands as a pioneering force in chamber music performance, education, and advocacy. With over 40 years in the Cavani String Quartet, she now serves as director and chair of chamber music at both the Peabody Institute at Johns Hopkins University and the Robert McDuffie Center for Strings at Mercer University. As a founding member of the Cavani String Quartet, Fullard has earned international recognition through extensive touring and distinguished honors including the Naumburg Chamber Music Award, Cleveland Quartet Award at Eastman, and as laureates at the Banff International and Bischoff competitions. The quartet has also received the Guarneri String Quartet Award for Artistic Excellence, Ohio Governor's Award for the Arts, ASCAP Award for Adventurous Programming, and was named Musical America magazine's Young Artist of the Year. While quartet in residence at the Cleveland Institute of Music, she collaborated with her Cavani colleagues to develop one of the nation's most respected chamber music programs. Her former students now perform in acclaimed ensembles including the Ithaca, Catalyst, Ennis, Jupiter, and Kronos quartets, and serve as principal members of major orchestras. She has also mentored students who founded groundbreaking conductorless ensembles such as the Far Cry and East Coast Chamber Orchestra. In February 2025, Annie co-authored The Art of Collaboration, Chamber Music Rehearsal Techniques, and Team Building with Dorianne Cotter-Lockhart, published by Oxford University Press. She has collaborated with members of the Emerson, Juilliard, Takash, and Guarneri string quartets, and taught at prestigious festivals including Aspen, Kneisel Hall, Interlochen, and the Perlman Music Program. This year, she received the Visionary Artist Award from the Chamber Music Center of New York, recognizing her continued influence on the art form's transformative impact. Thank you so much for joining me today on my podcast. I'm so honored to have you here. So, when did you start the violin? And you have told me in the past that you come from a very musical family. So, what was it like being raised in that kind of environment?
Music was part of the fabric of my life from the earliest memories. There was always music on in the house. I think that my parents took great comfort in having music on, and it was on in the car, and they fell in love, I think, because of music. So my father, they met in college, and my dad played the clarinet, and my mother played the viola, which are, two wonderful instruments that share a lot of repertoire.
Yes.
And I know that my mother told me that when she was in the hospital about to give birth to me, that on the radio they played all 9 Beethoven symphonies in a row. And so she feels that had an effect on me. I heard all the 9 Beethoven symphonies, and I am Beethoven obsessed. I feel some kind of kindred essence in that music, almost like no other, but I don't think there's any music that I don't try to fall in love with. But there's something about Beethoven. I wonder if that's because I heard it, from the time I was born.
Yeah.
Because my mother played the viola, and she was a very disciplined practicer. She would get a babysitter, or I think she sort of let me run wild in the yard, because there's a picture of me with these crazy red overalls, and I'm sitting like splayed out in the garden, and I have a stick in one hand and this giant piece of wood or something. I don't know where I got this, and I'm like sawing on it. I must have been 3 or 4, and I have this picture. It's hilarious, actually, the look on my face. And so I think at that point, my mother thought, "Okay, you know, let's try this."
Wow. Yeah. And you mentioned before being in an orchestra in high school. How did that kind of affect your career path as well and your musical development?
Well, fortunately, in terms of developing a sense of, sort of a lot of repertoire and experiences, my stepfather was a conductor. And I think, because my parents were musicians, they had no money for a babysitter. So, first of all, I went to every rehearsal
Mm.
and had to sit there or sit somewhere. I mean, this was just something that I thought was totally normal, and wait for this rehearsal to be over, and they'd, play a little bit and yada yada, and then play a little bit more and yada yada. And so at a certain point, I was basically okay enough as a violinist. And my parents, like parents want you to earn a little money and learn how to do that. And so I played in the back of this orchestra, the Springfield, Ohio Symphony, wonderful group of musicians that I was surrounded by. And actually, my stepfather did all 9 Beethoven symphonies. I played Strauss, Wagner, Mahler. And again, I didn't really think about it as being extraordinary. That's what my parents did. So I got a paycheck. It was very cool. And I didn't think of this as like, I'm going to do this as a career. It just, I think when you're a child and when you're an adolescent, you are experiencing things in sort of a moment where it takes you. And so it was really wonderful to be able to do that. And I got a little money. It was fun.
That's incredible. Yeah, an amazing experience to have for sure. So, you did your schooling at Yale, Eastman, and Indiana. How did that affect you and your career?
I went to a lot of different schools, actually. I think my parents, every year they would wait for, the call. Oh, well, by the way, I decided to transfer to. So, I had a singular vision, though, of playing chamber music and even playing string quartets, which is a little bit unusual for somebody who's 19 years old. But I
Mm.
was very focused on that for a number of reasons. It seems to come back to Beethoven because when I was in high school, I became really obsessed with Opus 127. And I listened to it over and over again, and I would sing it, and, like, how people put on, like, stuff in their car, and they're, like, head banging, and that would be me, "Da-da-da-da," I'm so going. And, there was seemed to be a focus happening to go to conservatory, and I'll go in chronological order. So I started at Indiana University, and, of course, Indiana has this legacy of some of the most incredible musicians in the 20th century. So Janos Starker was teaching there, Franco Gulli, George Scheibach, the pianist, and Menachem Pressler. And then, of course, the just sort of beacon of love and violin positivity and depth, Joseph Gingold.
Mm.
So I ended up starting at Indiana. There were 300 violinists. It's a huge school. There are 5 or 6 orchestras, and they have a fantastic opera program. And I remember playing Madame Butterfly, and I was a disaster, of course, because you get to that final act, and I'm like playing, and tears are running down my face. I can't see the music, and my sweetheart and I are crying. And Indiana was wonderful. It was maybe overwhelmingly big in a sense for me. And so I ended up sort of changing course, but I did meet Mary Peckham there,
Okay.
and who was the founding member of the Cavani Quartet and one of my dearest friends in the world, and just such a indescribably incredible person. So, and we just shared this love. Well, actually, we used to read chamber music all the time. So that's what we did. Instead of looking at our phones, people would walk around with stacks of music. Usually it was the Schubert Quintet and Brahms B-flat Sextet, and then you would just go on from there and just read and read and read all night. And then the quartet formed, Mary and I, and then the other two members I knew in high school, actually. So we had a shared background, and we formed and we spent a year at Ohio State University. And we were there. I really was very lucky because I went everywhere without having to pay tuition. Maybe that's why whatever school said you can come here for free. I mean, that's reasonable. So we ended up taking an audition. Oh, there was a year in between. We took an audition for a Yale fellowship and we didn't get it. So two of us went to Cincinnati Conservatory and Mary and I went to Yale. And that was a stunning year because Yale is so intellectually stimulating. Just being around the course offerings for the undergraduates in architecture, in art, in history, in literature, just being around people who love learning. So that was really stimulating. And the School of Music, which is a graduate school, of course, I loved my class. I studied with Shoko Aki there, a legendary teacher. I learned to play mahjong there, which I love playing. So if anybody, I want to play again. If anybody wants to play mahjong, just call me up because I bought a set recently and I forgot really how to play. I remember something about East Wind. And then the quartet auditioned for the Cleveland Quartet Award or program at the Eastman School. Mm. And anyone who loved string quartet playing wanted to be with the Cleveland Quartet. They were well established, sort of at the height of their touring career and recording career, incredible teachers, and phenomenal human beings. And so the role modeling from them was profound for us. Those 2 years were sort of like the highest and lowest I think I've ever been in my life because there was the quartet doing these things and getting coachings and having opportunities and New York debuts and learning Bartok 4 and 132 and then there was also learning how to work together. Mm. And we didn't really have a template for that. And we wanted to always be best friends, but there's a point where you need to have some objectivity and a little bit of able to separate yourself so that you don't spend every rehearsal getting your feelings hurt. So, but that was a profoundly wonderful experience. And Eastman had this long tradition of having incredible, the Yang Quartet was there, Meliora Quartet, Chester Quartet. So, yeah, a lot of people were influenced by the Cleveland Quartet at Eastman, and how great that the school was able to support that program. I wish there were more programs like that.
So you mentioned the Cleveland Quartet. Who were some of the other significant coaches of the Cavani Quartet, and how did they all influence you guys, and what did they teach you?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, let's start with the who. I think for us, formatively, we went to Norfolk and worked with the Tokyo Quartet. Okay, it's coming back to Beethoven again. When we were at Norfolk, Peter Ungen was in the quartet at that time, and Koichiro Harada was the cellist, Kikwe, and Kazuhide were the inner voices, and they did their first Beethoven cycle. Wow. And I remember being backstage with them because I think I was supposed to be in, how you do work when you're at the festival, and just feeling the vibe. Both, it was palpable. They were very excited. And also, there was a lot of adrenaline because to go and do a cycle the first time and to be able to hear all those quartets in one summer played by this just stunningly brilliant ensemble, who we also would play softball with every week. So, and maybe, like some of the team things maybe stuck with us as a group that way. Their master classes, their classes were always about them having a dialogue with each other and being incredibly respectful.
Mhm.
So they would stand up behind us, after we would play, and they would give us some comments, and one of them would say something, and then somebody else would sort of riff off of that. And I think we took our style of offering classes from that energy. They were up there with us. They listened to each other. They talked about sort of general concepts, rather than specific. And it was always inspiring to be around them.
Yeah.
So Tokyo Quartet, the Juilliard Quartet, particularly, well, all of them. We had very special interactions with, of course, Joel Krosnick, who left us too soon and was a force of the joy of discovery. He was like a child about learning these pieces, a really, really incredibly bright, smart person, but just curiosity.
Mhm.
So, and a great sense of humor. And Robert Mann has always been sort of a hero of mine. I think I had, like, a picture of him on my wall. No, I had a Juilliard Quartet poster because I heard them when I was in high school, and I heard the Debussy Quartet for the first time and thought, "Okay, now that I would love to do." I don't even know what they just played, but that feeling is unbelievable.
Mhm.
And, Earl Carlos, who was in the quartet at that time, was our coach in Aspen, and there's a couple funny stories, but we drove all night to audition for the Center for Advanced Quartet Studies at Aspen. We drove all night through a blizzard, because that's how we were, in some sort of, like Toyota mini car, and didn't sleep, and we got to our audition with Mr. Carlos, and he's like, "Are you guys crazy?" Like, well, I think he was so impressed with our determination to get there, and we played, and he accepted us to the program, and then we spent the summer almost living in his house learning Opus 132.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that he said, when we said we really wanted to work on this piece, and we were so young and so inexperienced in a way, and he never said, "Oh, you're gonna have to wait until, you're not ready." What he said was, "You're going to bring to this experience of learning this piece, you will kind of approach it where you are now, and then you're gonna play it many, many times, and each time there will be a wonderful layer of your self-awareness and the context of your life and what you bring to this."
Mhm.
Wow, this is a complete Beethoven theme. Now that I'm thinking about this, it's a thread. I've never thought about it that way, but and, his dogs were always on the couch in the coachings, and Cookie was the dog's name. So we have Cookie, and then, we have a coach, and then Cookie, and so, and it was almost measure by measure.
Wow.
Yeah, so I have all of his markings. But subsequently, as he predicted over the years, the last time we did a cycle, I put my old part away and I started totally from scratch.
Mhm.
And it was really frightening not to have the bowings that I was used to and the fingers I was used to. And I really wanted to completely, and looked at the score and tried to come at it from the perspective of where I was at the time. So anyway, yeah, we're really lucky. I'm leaving out wonderful people at University of Michigan. Andrew Jennings, only had one coaching with him, and I remember every minute of it.
Yeah.
Fabulous on Dvorak American and sort of folk music, and he's a brilliant person. And yeah, I'm probably forgetting somebody in in my enthusiasm, but I think those were the Juilliard, the Cleveland, and the Tokyo Quartet were our sort of formative, and then we had our private teachers and also other string quartets that were our peers that we learned a lot from.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, where does the name Cavani come from, and what were rehearsals like, and what are rehearsals like still today?
So Cavani is a 19th century instrument maker. Beautiful instruments, very warm in their sound, and there was a father and son, Vincenzo and Giovanni Cavani. And when we first formed, I think it was about a week in, and already we were like, "Okay, we need to do a gig," right? We were preparing for a master class, actually with Andrew Jennings. We played for Andrew Jennings after being together for 1 week.
Wow.
And, uh but we did somebody said, "You need a name," and then we were thinking we were gonna, you know, we all do gigs, right? So, I remember this discussion. I'm sure my colleagues might have a different memory, but what I remember is that I really wanted to be the Chagall Quartet. I
Oh.
wanted to be something or O'Keeffe after George O'Keeffe because I love visual art and I'm obsessed with it like you are, and that got, like there was like, sort of, the silence of your group where nobody's gonna say no, but you just I was like, "Okay," and discovered Erica needed to borrow an instrument at the time, and it was a Cavani viola, and Susan, our founding second violinist, had a Cavani violin at that time, and, like, a beautiful, beautiful sound. It's a mellow instrument, but very glowing, very warm, and I don't know who, probably Erica or Susan said, "Well, why don't we just be the Cavani Quartet?" And it stuck.
Wow.
So that's the story, but I remember I used to say to people, "Well, is it a pasta dish? Is it B, designer jeans by Vincenzo Cavani, or an instrument maker?" So, yes. And you find them around, they pop up once in a while, so modern Italian. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what about rehearsals? Mm.
Rehearsals. I'm trying to remember when we first started, I think we had no method. We didn't do warm-ups. I don't I'm surprised we got anything done. I think there was a lot of playing through and trying to figure out what is this process?
Mm.
And I remember just that we were really in love with the piece. We chose 2 works to do because of their slow movements. Opus 20, number 4, and Mendelssohn Opus 13
Yeah.
because of those slow movements.
Mm.
And so I think we sort of flailed away, and somehow there was a spark between us and a sound quality in the 4 players and sort of a similar passion for this. And thank goodness we got a lot of really great coaching that helped us to figure out what to work on for the next coaching. When we came out of school and we had to rehearse on our own, I remember we thought it would be great to do a 6 a.m. rehearsal. Yeah, that'll get stuff done. What was good about it was nobody said a word. We would show up and it was really quiet. I remember we were learning Ravel Quartet, and I remember feeling like I was jumping off a cliff without a net because we weren't gonna have a coaching. You get really used to you wanna play for people, right? You get used to that, and we were so lucky with our coaches being so inspiring. We're gonna learn it, and, the 6 a.m. rehearsal lasted, I think, for a week, and then we, rehearsed at a normal hour, and I think there was quite a bit of flailing And then we started to adopt some ideas to make sure that everyone had an equal say in the group, because everybody has a different personality, everybody has a different way of processing, everybody has a different way of relating to the world. I never would have thought about it that way when I was, when we were just starting out. Don't think I had the awareness. But we figured out some things along the road to help us have productive rehearsals, so that we were focusing on rhythmic alignment, on intonation, starting to sort of separate ideas, and also that we each took equal time in the interpretive process.
Mm.
And 4 years into our existence, we got the residency at CIM. So once we started to have to articulate to students to help, that's when some of these rehearsal techniques started to become a little bit more tangible, more practical, and something that we could actually explain to people. And then we began to use them more ourselves.
Mhm.
So yeah, there was quite some door slamming and crying, and there were also some elation too, because being an artist, especially being a musician, you really have to learn to be empathetic and put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Mhm.
And you can do it the hard way, or you can start to accept that there are lots of different ways of achieving the same thing.
It's very comforting, to me as a student to hear that, like, a very esteemed quartet and well-established quartet kinda had a little bit of a rougher start in terms of rehearsing and learning how to work together, and then, you've come so far and you've written the book about how to collaborate with each other, and so that's very inspiring to hear.
I will say that the one unifying aspect of our playing together was our love of the music.
Mm.
And I always remind students the music will never let you down. It will always be there for you. And so even when things are really difficult, you can depend on the music to give you a creative resource, or to reinvigorate your inspiration, so you can be more open to somebody, or you can find a different way to relate to another person. And the fact that a small group of people are working towards such a beautiful goal, that's a very positive force that can override a lot of the other difficulty. And we had great role models,
Yeah.
so we knew what to do from coaching to coaching.
Yeah, no, for sure, that's amazing. What was the timeline for when you guys did competitions, and what was that part of your career like?
I think in the generation of string quartets in the early 90s, Borromeo, Brentano, St. Lawrence is a little bit later, Ying's a little bit later, but sort of around there. I think that competitions were starting to become something that you did as a young ensemble. And in addition to trying to find management, if you were really serious about staying together and committing to the group and to the art form, that generation started doing more of,
Mhm.
to sort of establish themselves. So I think, one of the most famous in this country is Fishoff, and they have an amazing legacy, and have supported so many wonderful chamber music ensembles, string quartets, and piano trios, and other instrumentation. And so we prepared for that, and there were there were a couple in California that we did. One that we won, Clint Eastwood gave us the award. And we got our picture taken with Clint Eastwood. That was, like, the best thing about it. Um, and Coleman was in California. That was there for a long time. And then, of course, Fishoff, and then we prepared for Banff. They were motivating. We had to bring repertoire to a very, very high level, and so just we really honed in on playing it together, um, and all of the sort of aspects, the foundational aspects of sharing music. And we also felt really strongly about the character of the music that we were playing. I mean, I know that when we would go to these competitions, we would try to make friends with the other groups. It's a little bit like four golden retrievers. Hi, how are you? And some people, when they're at competitions, they're getting their face on, right? And it's the thing that I can't stand about them. That's not a real way of interacting in terms of the value system for creating art. And some people we bonded with. And our opportunity to become resident quartet at CIM came about because of Fischoff. We were second prize, but one of the judges really liked us, and that, sort of was a catalyst for us being invited to go. So you never know, but you cannot make this about winning a prize. I feel, really strongly about you have to experience the competition. And of course, we went to Fischoff together
Mhm.
and we had a great time. And it was very intense, and it was wonderful to watch the other groups. And I know Carlos is very close now. He's hangs out with Poesis,
Yeah.
who happened to be the winners that time. But I think you felt really good about the experience.
Oh,
And
yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I always underline, I know it sounds kind of strange to say, but don't go to a competition to win.
Mhm. Yeah.
Go to be your best self.
Mm.
And if on that given day, a set of judges in that hall finds a relationship with you, that's beautiful. That's validating.
Mhm.
But it could be different every day. So you cannot base your self-esteem or your value, intrinsic value as an artist on success or recognition. It's the
Mhm.
creation
Yeah.
of the beauty that's the value. And the great thing about playing chamber music is that you're together, and competitions can really bond people. I know that it did for us in Naumburg particularly, because we said no matter what happened that we would never do another competition after Naumburg.
Mm.
So I felt we were very fortunate to be one of the winners of that, and that validated us for the public.
Mm.
But it wouldn't have mattered because
Yeah.
we felt good about how we played, and we felt like, we were ourselves. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful, and that's a really great mindset just, um, for any type of competition in this classical music world because, in my last episode, we were talking about competition and how the entire industry is full of it, winning jobs and studio positions, and it's just about, like, trying to be the best musician you wanna be and growing and creating art is really the
Yes.
bottom line.
But really what our job is to translate, an experience and an experience of the composer, but then that becomes a part of us.
Mhm.
And the real recognition and success comes from pushing yourself to be able to do that at the highest level.
Mhm.
And then again, that will never let you down.
Yeah.
So any performance of sharing music with any audience is a wonderful thing. That's success.
Yeah.
And, you have to keep repeating that because particularly in this country, we are all about, the newest and the best and the rating system because that's how we identify. But as artists, we have a different lens, and, you know, we can see things a little bit bigger. So yeah, and it's a very personal thing to be an artist. And exterior things are nice, but it's not the reason to do it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for Thank you to Annie Fullard for such an inspiring episode. I loved hearing about how the Cavani Quartet developed as a group and the guidance they received from some of the most influential quartets of the older generation. Stay tuned for part 2 of Annie Fullard's interview to learn more about how she developed her chamber music rehearsal techniques that have affected groups and transformed chamber music around the nation. She will also talk about the importance of chamber music in today's society and give her advice to aspiring professional musicians. Thank you so much for joining me on Backstage Classical Career Conversations, and be sure to subscribe to the show and rate us on the platform you're using. To donate to the show to help us keep creating content, click on the support link in the description. I'm Katrina Stroud, and it was great to see you here. Until next time, stay inspired and listen to the stories of others.